Hello, everyone. I'm Mio Stevens-Gandara, Assistant Professor of Photography and current organizer for cultural events at Rio Hondo College. The Cultural Events program at Rio Hondo College presents a diverse selection of arts and entertainment free of charge for our community. Rio Hondo's Cultural Events program showcases the visual and performing arts work of students and faculty, as well as regional, national, and international artists. Our spring semester programming focuses on youth and community empowerment. If we should face any technical difficulties today, please be patient. We will work it out. If you have questions for our panelists, please post them and we will answer them at the end of the talk. Today, we are excited to have Rio Hondo librarian Claudia Rivas with us moderating a panel of 5 zine creators from across North America. Librarian Claudia Rivas was born in El Salvador and immigrated to the U.S., where English became her second language. She has earned a bachelor's degree in English from UC Irvine, master's in TESOL from USC, and master's in Library and Information Science from San Jose State University. Before joining Rio Hondo College as a librarian in 2014, Claudia taught English and ESL for 11 years. She understands how important it is for students to see someone like themselves in a position as an educator and now librarian. Claudia was introduced to zines in 2018 as they were discussed as a possibility for the Rio Hondo College Library collection. She began doing research, connecting with other zine librarians, and attending small zine fests. The more zines she read, the more she fell in love with them. Claudia was particularly interested in stories and learning about topics that aren't commonly seen or heard in major publications. She could see how our population of students could connect with zines and hopefully be inspired to make their own. I couldn't agree more. So welcome, Claudia, and welcome, panelists.
Thank you, Mio, for that wonderful introduction. So let's begin by briefly reviewing what zines are and their role at Rio Hondo College Library. So zines are independent, self-published DIY magazines. They are made with high impact meaning and messages. They're intentionally anti-commercial with limited copies or small batch runs, made with photocopiers or printers, and can be sold, swapped, or given away. They can be made and distributed by anyone, regardless of age or skill set, which is the opposite of mass media. Zines provide a platform and opportunity for marginalized or alienated individuals and communities' voices to be heard. Zines can be educational, calls to action, political, fun, promotional, informative, personal, and so much more. At Rio Hondo College Library, a little over a year ago, I began workshops to educate our students about zines and provided a safe place for them to make their own. The workshops proved popular with students and faculty, and we began our collection of zines from student donations, zinester donations, and purchasing directly from zinesters. Today, we will focus on 2 themes in connection with zines. Zines as building blocks for communicating within and reinforcing communities, and also zines as tools for self-empowerment, self-expression, and/or self-healing. Today, we have 5 amazing zinesters for you who will speak to these themes and their experiences with zines. In order of presentation, we will hear from Cleopatra Peterson, Karina Haglin, Lorenzo Diggins Jr., Eunsoo Jeong, and Kimberly Robertson. So let's begin with Cleopatra, who is with us all the way from Canada. Cleopatra is a non-binary multidisciplinary artist based in Toronto. They hold a Bachelor's of Design from Ryerson University and a Bachelor's of Art from OCAD's Publications program. Their work focuses on detailed illustration and storytelling through a variety of forms, including printmaking. They are the co-founder of Old Growth Press, a small press that publishes zines annually with a focus on POC and LGBTQ authors, and lessening its environmental impact. Their own work explores themes of the body, home, healing from trauma, and their belief in love. They are a self-taught illustrator and came to zine making later in life after discovering their obsession with bookmaking and working on comics in their spare time. So let's look at a few samples of Cleopatra zines, including her zine Weeds and Kingston is for Lesbians. And now I'm going to pass it to Cleopatra to speak about zines and their experience with them.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for having me. So I'll just get right into it. I came to making zines pretty late in my life. They've always existed, of course, but I really never knew how to make them myself because I didn't really know how. And I'd never seen them distributed, and I'd never been to a zine fair before I moved to Toronto. The city that I grew up in was a lot smaller than where I live now, and that's probably responsible. My first experience with zines would be at the Toronto Comic Arts Festival, which was a very overwhelming place to start. TCAF is like the largest comic arts event in Canada, and attending smaller festivals is a lot nicer that way. And it's one of the best parts of making zines because you get to share the experience with so many other people, and you get to meet people who are like you and who aren't, and you get to discover something new. Big comics festivals are still great too, and some of my fondest memories are with TCAF, and I ended up working at their bookstore later on. But I think smaller spaces can be a little bit easier to access and a little less overwhelming, especially if you get crowd anxiety. So I'm going to be showing some zine examples as we go through my talk. And this is just an example of a zine that I made with my friends when we were tabling at a zine fair together. So we were all over the room, and we just passed this piece of paper around and we all drew on it. The festival was Zine Dream, which is a annual local zine festival in Toronto. So zine fairs can also be a kind of weirdly exhausting experience if you're used to being the only person of color in the room. And I'm very used to counting how many people of color are tabling, including myself, and we're always the minority. As with all things, there are good and bad. I've been to a lot of great small fairs that support and celebrate the work of people of color, disabled people, and the LGBTQ plus community. They are curated to represent those on the margins and are the best place to find your community. And a lot of the time they have food for the vendors, which is also one of the best perks because you should feed your vendors. So in terms of zine creation, I feel like I started very backwards. The first time I ever had to make a book was for an illustration class, and we were given zero instruction on how to actually make it. It was supposed to be a children's book where we were celebrated for drawing people who weren't white. And not because I myself wasn't white, which was why I was drawing Black people to begin with, but because diversity sells. It's funny to look back on it and see that I'm being praised for putting people like me in my work when it was visibly obvious why I was drawing that. I was doing that because I wanted to make work that represented me and people like me, because growing up, I had never seen people like me. I grew up in a very, very, very white town. And even now, it's still hard to see people like me in work unless I make it myself. Identity is a very complex thing that can't be marketed. It is a lot more than having a Black character or a lesbian or someone with a visible disability. Like, these visual representations are important, but you can tell when they've been inserted as a placeholder. So the book I was working on was impossible. There were all these things you needed to know and format to get it to print properly, and we were given no instruction. And I think that if I had known how to make a zine, I would have been able to figure out how to do this a lot better. Because all you really need to make a zine is a one-page zine, which is what I showed as an example earlier. And then from there, you can really figure out how to make a simple booklet, and then you can start to make anything. Because zines used to be just cut and paste photocopies, which was pretty important to remember, that they were very easy and cheap to make and easy to distribute out to everyone. You get to decide who's seeing your work, and you get to make it yourself. You don't need someone else to do the work for you. And if you're overwhelmed when you're making a zine for your first try, just try to keep it simple. So for me, figuring out zines stemmed with how I was in the wrong program, but I didn't know or feel like I had the option to drop out or switch majors or universities. So I forced myself to graduate, which is why I got the Bachelor's of Design from Ryerson, and it was in fashion. It's pretty hard to figure out what to do with your life, and I'm pretty sure I'm still trying to figure that out. And I don't care about fashion anymore. But I did learn a lot about art and design there, but it was a big cost to my mental health. And then I would later go back to school anyways. And I would go to publications at the Ontario School of Art and Design, which I enjoyed so much more. It's not surprising that someone who loves making zines would love being in a publications program. It was really a great program to be a part of because it celebrated making bookworks, making work for a public, and working together as a small community. And we really benefited from being a tiny program. There was like 20 of us, which doesn't happen often. So I would make my most popular zine in my class there. Wasn't my first zine, but it's Kingston is for Lesbians, which is about growing up in Kingston, Ontario, and falling in love with my best friend, and becoming obsessed with my neighbors who were lesbians. And kind of just about growing up as a child. It's a perzine, so it's a big mix of illustrations and text. But everyone loves that zine. It does really well at zine fairs. But before I got to making zines like Kingston is for Lesbians, I was trying to figure out how to make stories that were visual and included text, like how it turned out. I've always been an illustrator, and it would take me a long time to believe I could tell a story. The best medium for this was comics, but I thought those were all about superheroes, and I wasn't really interested in those. I was wrong. Comics like zines or any format of art are boundless. They can be anything. The problem with so many of these instances was that I thought the skills were too advanced or that there was no place for me. If you don't see yourself represented anywhere, of course, you're not going to think you belong, and then it's hard to know where to start. So I'm going to show two examples of my first comic. This one it's all folded bad, but this is The Woods, which is also a one-page zine based on the lyrics of the Teddy Bear Picnic. It's like a horror scene, and it opens up to a poster. So once again, one-page zine. So this really helped me learn how to make things like Pact, which was my first published comic that I was pretty proud of. I'm kind of more embarrassed of it now, but I just wanted to do a lot of detailed illustrations for it and had fun with all the paneling I could do. So if you take anything away from this, I want you to know that you can make a zine, tell your story, anything you want, and someone out there will see it and it will resonate and it will matter. Your audience exists, but really you should be making work for yourself, work that you enjoy and that matters to you. This isn't about making money, though it definitely can be a nice perk. You should monetize your work, and you can. But I think it's about finding people like you so you know you aren't alone out there, or putting yourself out there so people can find you too. There are zines, comic stories for everyone about anything. There are no limits. If there were limits, we wouldn't have such a surplus of mediocre white work. I think that was what was stopping me. All I saw was white work, and I didn't see myself. I taught myself to stop caring about the white mainstream, to stop engaging with content that harmed me and didn't represent me. We all have to unlearn things that exist because of white supremacy, because it's built into every system. We don't even know it half the time. My life is better for this. I make better work now. I just know that for every bad piece of work out there by rich white people, there are hundreds of white people on the margins that are even better. Sometimes you just have to dig to get it, but it is there. So the industries of publishing and art don't often support people of color, people with disabilities, people who are LGBTQ+, and people like me. This is what I mean about white supremacy being built into a system. You have to create and nurture your own space, your own center. That's why I co-founded Old Growth Press, so I could help in a small way to help facilitate publishing for people on those margins, celebrate them and their work and stories. We only take up such a small portion of space, but I know that space is really important. So I just wanted to quickly show the publications from our first round, from yesterday by Natalie Mark, What They Don't Know by Riley Pajero, and 5 Minutes in Karachi by Misbah Ahmed. Yeah, I'm really proud of the work that we published with these people. So these industries want you to give them your trauma or the same story that they think that every marginalized identity has. And there is a place for that because a lot of my work does stem from trauma. And at the time it was pretty healing to create it. But that's not all we are. And we deserve to tell every kind of story because we have every kind of story to tell. So I encourage you to find all the lines you're willing to cross. You do not owe anyone anything, but you do owe yourself kindness. I got to a point in creating my work when I no longer wanted to make it about what hurt me, which then made it hard to make work at all because it was all I knew how to make and profit off of. So make sure you make space for joy in your work and don't make it at the expense of yourself. So I've made a lot of zines about a lot of different themes, which rhymes. Love, self-harm, racial identity, being queer. Each piece of work has helped me grow into who I am as an artist, but also to understand who I am as a person and what intentions I want to put into the world. I'm definitely embarrassed about a lot of my older work, but I think that's normal because it's just a record of growth. I'm excited for the zines I will make in the future and what they will explore, and I'm excited too about what new zines will exist for me to discover in the world. I think having peers who are all on their own journeys, making their own work, is one of the most exciting parts about being part of the zine community. I'm excited for the work that you will all make too. There's always something new to look forward to or discover. And to end, I will just show my new zine that was shipped to me today. So it's fresh, published by Really Easy Press, a new comic work that I've created. That concludes my presentation. Thank you so much for your time. Bye.
Thank you, Cleopatra. And if any of you are interested in contacting them or learning more about their work, visit their website at cleopatra.ca or follow them on Instagram or Twitter at Cleopatra with 2 I's, or email them directly at cleopatra.peterson@gmail.com. And I know I've seen a couple questions come in the chat. We will get to those at the end. So please keep those questions coming in for our Q&A portion at the end, okay? Up next, we have visiting us from the East Coast, Karina Haglin. Karina is a chronically ill and disabled queer femme artist, activist, and librarian based in Ithaca, New York. They've been creating zines since 2016 as a way to transform their trauma through art. Karina Zines centers radical vulnerability and self-love, healing as resistance, trauma recovery, queer femme joy, and mental health. Their hope is that by sharing their story, affirmations, and art, that they can offer messages of hope and healing to other queers, femmes, disabled folks, and survivors struggling with their mental health. Karina were recently awarded the 2020 Shane Patrick Boyle Emerging Zinester Grant by Zine Fest Houston. And now let's take a look at some of their samples, such as Femme Filth, the Little Book of Affirmations for Survivors, and Surviving to Thriving, a Trauma Survival Toolkit. And now I will pass it on to Karina to speak about their zines and their experiences with them.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm so excited to share space with all of y'all. So I'm Karina, and I use they, them pronouns. I am a chronically ill and disabled, fat, queer, femme, survivor, academic, librarian, and artist. And I'm the zinester behind Femme Filth Press, which is the small press I founded to publish my zines under. My zines are really focused and grounded in themes of radical self-love, community building, trauma recovery, healing as resistance, queer femme joy, mental health vulnerability, and community care. What I started making zines for myself to help myself process and heal from something really traumatic, but I found that other people benefited from my work too. So as I've started to heal more from that experience, I've really tried to dedicate my art to empowering fellow survivors to move from surviving to thriving through the creation of cute and colorful zines that I hope inspire you and empower you, offer you hope, teach you practical coping skills, and can serve as like literally a pocket-sized companion or friend that reminds you that you're not alone, like not ever. A lot of folks who have my little book of affirmations for survivors literally carry this in their purse with them. So I got involved in zines in the early 2010s. I was in my early 20s at that point, and I was raped by a friend. And at the time, I was involved in punk and feminist communities where zines had been a staple of my cultural background. I had never created a zine, but I decided to try making my own because like I was going crazier from trying to keep what happened like inside and to myself. Zines gave me the space I needed to process my rape and the onslaught of like really intense and overwhelming feelings that came with it. Zines also connected me with a community of fellow survivors who helped support me and reminded me that I wasn't alone. And zines really gave me a way to channel my trauma, thoughts, and feelings creatively into art. It's like I'm a recovering heroin addict. I've been sober 6 years now. So zines were an actual healthy and productive outlet for everything I was feeling and going through. I think of my artistic process like composting. I take literal shit and I turn it into something beautiful, hopeful, inspiring. So now I'm going to talk about a few of my zines, and then I'm going to wrap up by doing a reading of the Little Book of Affirmations for Survivors. So FemFilth 1, I'm bad at showing the camera, but I'm trying, was the first zine I published. It dealt with topics of radical vulnerability, living with CPTSD, queer femme survival, trauma recovery, resilience, and mental health. And like by 2018, I think, I had published 4 issues in this series. And each issue like explored these complex themes at different points throughout my healing process. So I was encouraged to actually create this series after being awarded a grant by Richmond Zine Fest to write, publish, and print a second copy, like a second issue of FemFilth. The issue debuted at their annual Zine Fest at Richmond Public Library in 2017. And that grant and Zine Fest cemented my decision to keep publishing FemFilth and other zines. The support and affirmation I received at that Zine Fest was incredibly meaningful to me because I felt like my trauma was not defining me the way that it had been like in so many spaces. Like I was just like the crazy, like traumatized person, you know? And also like I was finally in control of my story and my life. Taking back control was super duper important to me to like heal, and being seen, affirmed, supported, and even admired for the artwork I created was so healing, especially when I heard from other survivors that my work had helped them like move towards healing too. And the zine community is just so welcoming and encouraging, regardless of your skill level or how much experience you have, you're always welcome there. So in the past 2 years, which marked my exit from graduate school and into my career as an academic librarian, I published at least a dozen more zines. All of my work is based on my lived experiences as a chronically ill and disabled queer femme survivor. So I'm going to show you a few of them. The first ones are mini zines. This is journaling prompts for self-care. It's a zine of journaling prompts to offer you some ways to imagine what self-care can look and feel like, how to strengthen your skills and go deeper with the work you're doing. Then I just showed affirmations for radical self-love instead of the journaling one. But this is the journaling one. It's just like very rainbow. And so affirmations for radical self-love, which you've just seen, is a pocket-sized roadmap for just like creating new stories about yourself while letting go of old limiting beliefs we've held on to for so long. I can't tell which direction the camera wants me to go, so I'm sorry about that. And this is my most recent one, Pink. Pink is a zine about discovering the histories and communities of non-binary folks and queer femmes, healing my relationship with gender and sexuality, color theory, surviving trauma and chronic illness, and of course, the color pink. And then there's mid-sized zines I make. This is Surviving to Thriving, a trauma survival toolkit. It basically just compiles the coping strategies, techniques, and tools I've used to move from surviving to thriving in my trauma recovery and healing process as a survivor. And I really like this one because, like Pink, Thriving is a zine about moving from surviving to thriving, and it talks about like radical self-love, healing for survivors, trauma recovery, vulnerability, trusting the process, asking for help, and positive affirmations. And finally, Friendships as Resistance, Creating Communities of Care, Part 2, is a zine about my experiences as they relate to community care, moving from surviving to thriving, as well as topics such as competition culture and jealousy, boundary work, and radical vulnerability. It includes a list of questions designed to help you create your own boundary language, and also like a recommended reading list and a workspace to dream up your own like list of needs and wants in your friendships. So when I'm out in the world, ableism, homophobia, and misogyny weaponize my disabilities, my illnesses, and my queer feminist against me. But in my zines, these things that have been used to hurt, abuse, and disempower me, the things that have been a source of trauma, shame, and stigma, become celebratory. They become a way to connect with people like me, to feel less alone, and to affirm both my and my readers' identities and experiences. They become a source of power and pride rather than pain, and they become a radical creative tool for reclamation. I eventually started selling them on Etsy. Since 2017, I've sold over 800 zines, and it's really helped support my life as someone living with lupus and CPTSD. So I'd love to wrap up by offering you a reading of the Little Book of Affirmations for Survivors, because I know that there are some of you in the audience who might need these words, and you definitely know a survivor, so maybe you could offer these words to them too, because I think they can be really healing. So, I have survived 100% of my worst days. I can get through this too. I believe in myself. I am still here. I am strong. I am allowed to be sensitive too. I do the very best I can, and that is enough. Healing is not linear. I am lovable. I will continue to grow and nurture myself with the tenderness that I deserve. When every day is a battle, it's okay to lose some days. I radically accept myself. It wasn't my fault. There's nothing wrong with asking for help. Asking for help is the bravest, most admirable thing I can do. Friends who don't want to pick a side aren't on my side. There is bravery in being soft. My body belongs to me and me alone. It's okay to be angry. My process is my process. Crying is a valid and understandable reaction to what I've been through. When I cry, I release my sadness, fear, and anxiety. I am loved and brave and strong and made of magic. I don't owe my abuser my forgiveness. I don't have to rebuild a relationship with anyone I choose to forgive. I may or I will never be the same again, and that's okay. I will move from surviving to thriving. Being vulnerable and talking about my experiences is nothing to be ashamed of. It's powerful and creates space for other survivors to share their stories too. I am more than my trauma. I am capable. When I practice self-love, that is knowledge. When I practice self-care, that is power. I am a force to be reckoned with. There are so many things to live for. I trust my gut. I appreciate my intuition for protecting me. I don't owe anybody my story. I am empowered to choose who gets access to my time, energy, and attention. Not everyone deserves it. Healing is a marathon, not a race. Slow progress is still progress. It can be difficult to work through this, but it will be worth it. And finally, I am not alone. Survivors exist in multitudes, in galaxies. There are whole communities and movements of us. Thank you so much for sharing space with me today, and Yeah, I really had a great time with y'all. Thank you.
Thank you, Karina. If you're interested in contacting them or learning more about their work, you can do so by visiting their website at karinakilljoy.com or follow them. Can we go back to the slide, contact slide? Thank you. Follow them on Instagram at FemFilthPress or at FemSupremacy, or visit their Etsy shop at etsy.com/shop/FemFilthPress. All right, next up we have another local zinester, Lorenzo Diggins Jr. Lorenzo is a visual artist, photography and illustration, creative director, and art book publisher based out of South Central Los Angeles. If he's not in pursuit of bringing his own creative endeavors to life, he is usually helping others actualize theirs. As a visual artist, Lorenzo is committed to using his work not only to tell the stories of his subjects, but also serve as an invitation for viewers to reflect and share their own stories. The common thread weaved throughout his work is a deep value in fostering connection among people. Simply put, he loves using his work as the tool to create community. And here are some samples of Lorenzo's zines, such as Simple Things, 21 Strangers, and 21 Days of Community. And now I'll pass it on to Lorenzo to speak about zines and his experiences with them. Lorenzo, you need to unmute.
Sorry, guys. Okay, sorry, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's such an honor to be to share space with the other zinesters, and yeah, I'm just looking forward to just sharing my experience. In 2013, I think I would say was my intro to the zine world. I attended the LA Zine Fest, and that was my first time actually learning about zines, and I was just so taken back by all the creativity in the room. And though I didn't make my first zine until 2015, I always credit 2013 as like the start of my zine journey, because I think for 2 years I was kind of like marinating on what I wanted my first zine to be. And similar to Cleo, like my background is also in fashion. I had a menswear line for like 7 years, and in 2015 I was kind of like in transition, trying to figure out what I was going to do next. And I remembered like it being a challenging time, like where I was just kind of down on myself. And as a way to kind of like, I guess, take stock and just ownership of like life, a simple illustration of something that brought me joy in my life. And at the end, I had 100 illustrations. And I was like, let me actually, I think this may be the opportunity for me to turn this into a zine. And I called it Simple Things. And it literally started off as just simple illustrations inspired by the simple things in life that brought me joy. And I mean, like the Mexican Coke. And so the format is just a story. So it was like Mexican Coke, my morning coffee, pens and notebooks. Like I'm an avid pen and notebook buyer. House plants, basketball, music. You can tell that this is dated because it's an iPod. Hot sauce, instant popcorn, the barbershop, my passport, and breakfast with my great grandmother. And so this was my first zine, and my only intention was to make one, and I released it on Christmas Day of 2015, and I had such a great response. And I was like, wow, I really wasn't expecting the response. I was like, man, this is something that I can possibly continue to do. So the following year, and just to give context, like I created a series of 4. So the following year, same for Christmas Day, I released another one. And this one I was using photography to share my story of simple things. And this one was inspired by the simple things that brought me joy in my community. And so this one is, instead of illustration, this one is photography. So just like, so it's more of it's a photo journal. And the diner, my barber shop, burger stand I grew up going to, some murals. Let's see. Parts of my community. This is Lamert Park where I live. This is like an iconic picture for me. This is the street I actually grew up, one of the streets I grew up on. And so just to give context, like this story was inspired because like I noticed that this was 2016, a lot of changes were being made in terms of just like the developments with like gentrification. And I wanted to document it because I kind of sensed I had like an insight on like community real estate. And I just knew that like a lot of things was popping up. And I was like, oh man, this is not going to be the same. So I'm thankful that I had the instinct to kind of take pictures of some of these things at that time, because fast forward 5 years, a lot of these things have changed. Like actually, a great example, the picture that I said, this car wash is still there, but it's been rebranded, and it's like, and this was like from the 60s. This car wash has already changed. It's another one. Sauce and swap meat, but I did in Ladera there was a Starbucks known as the Magic Johnson Starbucks, and when he retired, he had all these franchises, and he was one of the first ones to have like a Starbucks in that area. So this was a community where African American community where a lot of at any given moment you'll come in and you will see Black men playing chess or dominoes. So I captured this, and I say all that to say that now, fast forward, that it's actually not even there anymore. Yeah. So that was volume 2, and then volume 3, I made it's a mixture of both, where I'm sharing narrative, but this time I wanted to make it more interpretive. So it's more of a collage, I'll say. It's all these different elements brought together to kind of make one. So I have like some blackout poetry, Polaroids, short stories, more Polaroids, some word art, and this is, and I've released them all on Christmas Day. So this was Christmas 2017, and the last one in this series was Christmas of 2019, and similar to volume 3, this was also a collage where I wanted to be more interpretive, and it's all these different elements again. So some word art. This is actually my motto. I live by this. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm doing it anyways. Some of my illustration work. I love this picture. This was an homage to my grandfather who passed away in 2018, and this was the illustration I did of him when he was in the service. The cool thing about this, like I also made pins, and so many people have bought this thinking that it's Muhammad Ali, and I kind of let them. When they ask, I tell them who it is, but it's kind of cool that like they're buying it just for it's like actually my grandfather. More collage work. Short stories. Yeah. So this is this concludes my Simple Things series. And even though like I transitioned from fashion, a lot of the ways that I create is kind of using some of the things I learned in fashion, as far as like having a series or collections and color palettes. And then another series that I have, it's called 21 Days, the 21 Day Project. And I launched this one in 2017. I wanted to do something. So in 2017, I wanted to do something special for my birthday. And it was either, take a trip or give myself a party. Party being an exhibition. But I needed work to make the exhibition. So I came up with this idea. Since my birthday is July 21st, I came up with this idea to kind of like tie in 21. And so I came up with this called 21 Days, 21 Strangers. So for 21 days, I asked a different stranger for life advice, and I turned it into a zine. And the cool thing about this, and like just the work that I do, I love hearing other people's stories. And I think collectively, like when you're able to hear other people's stories, that's how we can learn collectively. So this is an exhibition of that. And what I loved about this is that it's a mixture of, like, I wouldn't say high, not low, but like it's some intuitive advice, and it's also just like some very straightforward advice. Like one of my favorite ones is actually day 2 from this guy named Austin. It says, "Don't compare, don't compete. Be easy on the people and harder on the system." And then another one, which is my favorite, and it's very practical for life advice, is day 12, and it says, "Be sure to floss your teeth and always do something." So it's cool that I have like a mixture of all these different words from people. So that was this 21 Days, 21 Strangers project. So again, I had a really great response from this, and just to keep the tradition, the following year on my birthday, I released another one, which was 21 Days of Community, in the same similar format. I asked 21 people how do they define community, and just getting some of the answers was so beautiful. A lot of these people are friends. Some people are strangers. Some people that I knew from mutual friends. Yeah. And I took all the images just in case anyone's wondering. Actually, this is one that I love from my friend Agatha. Community is made up of individuals. It's when communities come together that we become more than the sum of all of our parts. And then, yeah. And then lastly, from this series, I did this one in 2019. It's called 21 Days of Peace. And for 21 days, I asked 21 people, how do they define peace of mind, and what do they do to maintain it? Same format, portrait and then answer. Okay. Oh, here's a good one. So the prompt is, how do you personally define peace of mind? What do you do to achieve and maintain it? And Kevin's answer is, listen to the wind, breathe. By being chill, let go with just breathing. So yeah, this concludes this project, which is the 21 Day project. Truthfully, I'm supposed to have 4, but last year, as we all know, was a challenging year, and I just didn't get around to making it. But I plan on making one for this year, July. So I'm not sure of the title, but that will actually conclude this series of 4. And then another series that I launched is called Better with Time. And so I've been doing photography for like 10 years. But in 2019, I challenged myself to commit to film photography. And this series is, I call it a visual progress tracker. So from January to December, every quarter, which is every 3 months, I compiled my favorite images from that I took with film, and it was kind of cool to see throughout the year how I grew, and the whole concept of just getting better with time. And that's just something also that I just strive for, is just like I always try to get better with time. Yeah. Okay. More. This one is special. This was 2019. This was during a memorial for Nipsey Hussle at his marathon store. Just seeing like the hundreds of people out there. I kind of captured that. This is another good one in the Merck Park during one of the festivals. And this one is extremely special. So this is my great grandmother's home. This is where the house that I kind of grew up in. And then this is my great grandmother. She's 92 years old, and I'm one of her caretakers. So just concluding this one with her was special. Another one. I'm not gonna go through all of them, but just you get the gist. I think I was getting better with time. And then lastly, for volume 4, I did this one in all black and white photography. I love this image of my friend. Yeah. So that concludes just my series, but I have a bunch of other individual zines that I've done. This is one called Hikukoma, or one frame. It translates in one frame in Japanese, and this is a photo journal from one of my last trips to Japan. I made this one because usually Japan books, they start in reverse to ours, so it starts backwards, and it's just a photo journal, just me going through Tokyo, Kyoto, Osaka. This is some of my illustration work from some of the things that some of my favorite things about Japan. Really food, but yeah. Yeah. And to conclude, like since 2013, like was such a pivotal year in terms of me being exposed to zines, and what it's done and how it's like add value and richness to my life. It's something that I've also tried to emphasize and share with kids. So in 2018, I started teaching zine making workshops, and since then I've done so many. And one of the ways that I always teach kids, really emphasizing, one, controlling your narrative, but two, like that you can do a lot with a little. So I always use, similar to some of the other zinesters that shared, just let them know that they can start with just one sheet of paper, and I create these templates for them, and I teach them this way. Just let them know that they don't need a lot to make something. And that concludes my time. Thank you so much for tuning in.
Thank you, Lorenzo. If you are interested in contacting Lorenzo or learning more about his work, you can visit his website at lorenzodiggins.com or follow him on Instagram at essentialman_LD, or visit his website at colorblockcreative.com. Next, we have another local zinester, Eunsoo Jeong. Eunsoo is a Los Angeles-based artist and creator of Koreangry, a comic/zine series based on her daily struggles as a Korean-American immigrant woman and artist searching for identity. Koreangry is a 7-inch puppet/doll/armature/character that she created, sort of her alter ego. The Koreangry zine series is an ongoing search of her life told with this character, photographed with handmade props and sets. The zines include written excerpts, wordplay, poems, comics, crude sketches, and experimental digital collages. And here are just a few images of her zine samples. And I'll pass it on to Eunsoo to speak about her zines and her work with them.
Hello, everyone. My name is Eunsoo. Thanks for tuning in today. Thank you, Rio Honda College, for having this fantastic zinesters. I'm super excited to share my work with you. I'm a little nervous, so please bear with me a little bit. So I started my zine similarly out of anger and in a ways to cope with my depression and anxiety. Back in 2016, I think I had it came to the boiling down of this fear and nervousness and like just every feeling of uncomfortable with myself, of like this feeling. So I started writing down my feelings about what is causing me this kind of feeling. And at least the list just went on and on and on. And I found myself that maybe I could create this undeniably like angry character that I just don't have to explain whether I'm angry or not, because I was not really comfortable with expressing myself before. So having that just clear angry face, it really helped me, and it kind of gave me kind of excitement for being able to express my way that way. So I started designing a character, and I start making stories about like what I'm feeling in sketches and different ideas. I can kind of show you in the beginning, it looked very different. This were some of my designs. And I kind of like find a way to see if I can make this a puppet, because I was a huge fan of like Wallace and Gromit growing up, like some kind of a stop motion kind of physical thing. And I was always fascinated with those maquette characters, armature doll. So I reached out to somebody who worked in a stop motion, Jenny, and she helped me with like making a blueprint of the skeleton body that I can start with. And from there, I built a wire. And this is ongoing, and I'm still learning. So this is a wire. And then from there, I kind of experimented with different way to build a body. And here, and there's tons more bodies that I've built up. So this is now today my armature model that is like my character. I talk about experiences that are very personal to me, things that I want to share, what I learn. It first started from definitely from anger and depression place, but today I think making this comic brings me a joy and source of purpose. I was formerly undocumented immigrant for a long time, and I wasn't really used to talk about, I wasn't really allowed to like talk about my status or like talk about feelings in general. So I decided to like talk about that in comic form, and I wanted to do that because it gives me happiness. And then the humor, I feel like was healing for me, making fun of things, profanity use, like anything that I wasn't allowed to do, I could do it in a comic because I didn't really have that association between my comics to my identity in the beginning. So in a way that it helped me to be free. So this is like kind of like an idea of a page of a zine. And then I talk about the experiences I had, and then I go over, and that's how I usually do. I did this comic about know your rights after taking a workshop to how to protect myself or immigrants, to share what happens when the ICE comes, and then there are things that you can do to protect yourself. And I made this comic, and that kind of helped me to get a lot more connection with other immigrant folks who may have experienced this. And it has been really helpful for that. Let me see what I can do. I can show. So part of this process, it's not really a linear process. Sometimes it's just the sketches of ideas or comics. It's just like a feeling, or it could be just like a really crude sketches or drawings. And sometimes it could be a long narration description, like a long narration of like ideas that I've broken down, sometimes a written word. And I kind of experiment a lot with taking lots of photos and composing it because I like that spontaneous aspect of my work. It's not perfect, but I love that I'm learning a lot. This year marks 20th year me being in the United States, and I'm working on zine number 10. So it's kind of cool to see like my progression of my work within my comic. I felt like my voice is more, I feel more stronger and confident about myself as I've been doing this. And I learned a lot from letting go of my certain attachment to my work, especially when I talk about my work. It's not really something that people like to hear because it challenges the norm and it challenges the values that we have. And I think that the nature of like cancel and nature of like hating, it's very it's very like it's very okay thing. If the work matters to you, any work that matters to you, it is hard. And as every other zinester said, it's way to keep going and being consistent of telling your story, because it's not being really given that much of a platform. It's very important to keep going with what you want to say, what you value. It's important to say. For me, I recently, with the rising hate crimes against Asians, anti-Blackness within my community, those kind of issues are so like connected, and to understand that where we can untangle this like very interconnected issue through a little bit of a humility and like a little bit of a how do I say, little bit of humor and lighthearted through my comic, I find it very meaningful and healing. I have been traveled outside of California to attend Zine Fest, different states, and from there I learned that me being Asian American in California, growing up, it's also a very privileged thing that I don't think that it's I always felt like my story has to be like Asian voice, but I learned to accept that's not the case, because we have such a different experiences, and it's okay to like not how do I say, not follow my work, and I feel like you can relate to it because we are very different, and that's an okay thing to do. I was a little nervous, so I hope this was okay, but let me see if I can show you the progression of hands, because I love showing the progress of the hands. So first I would start with something small like this hand. I don't know if you can see it. I don't know if you can see it. And then from there, you just kind of like build a more wire, and then I add the skin. And then I just kind of like keep making and like finessing the craftsmanship of my work. It's something that I value outside of than just a zine. I think that kind of concludes my section. So if you have any question, contact me.
Thank you, Eunsoo. Yes, so if you are interested in contacting Eunsoo or learning more about her work, you can do so by visiting her website at koreangry.com or following her on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter at koreangry, or email her directly at koreangry@gmail.com. And I know we're running a little behind, but hang in there. We still have one last amazing panelist, another local zinester, Kimberly Robertson. A citizen of the Muskogee Creek Nation, is an artivist, scholar, teacher, and mother who works diligently to employ Native feminist theories, practices, and methodologies in her hustle to fulfill the dreams of her ancestors and to build a world in which her daughters can thrive. She was born in Bakersfield, California, and currently lives on unceded Tongva lands. Robertson is an associate professor of women's gender and sexuality studies at Cal State University, Los Angeles. Informed by Indigenous feminisms, Robertson's creative practices include screen printing, collage, beadwork, installation art, and zine making. They address the settler, colonial, and heteropatriarchal violences that plague Indigenous communities and operationalize the decolonial worlds many of us desire to live in. Her work centers the ideas and practices of ceremony, storytelling, intersecting subjectivities, dislocation, decolonization, and Indigenous futurities. And here are some samples of her zines: Beading as Medicine, Community Health Through Culture, and Beading a Path to the Future. And I'll pass it over to Kimberly to speak on zines and her experiences. You're muted, Kimberly.
Thank you. So he's Jay, everyone. I'm really excited to be here also. And just to share space, I feel so inspired right now that I don't even really want to share my zines. I just want to start making again. So as everyone, or as Claudia already mentioned, I'm Muskogee Creek, so I'm American Indian, and I'm a professor in women's gender and sexuality studies at Cal State LA. But I was a first generation college student, and it took me a really, really long time to get through school. And there were many times that I wanted to drop out. Academia has always been like a really uncomfortable place for me in a lot of ways. And so zine making has been a big part for me of, sort of my survival within academia, and a way for me to be able to share my ideas and my stories and those of my community with other folks. So I don't even know where to start. So a lot of the zine making that I do, so most of my zine making is collaborative. Very, very little of the work that I do individually. And so that's one of my favorite, that's one of my favorite things about zine making, is that it can be a very collaborative process. And so in that way, right, it's very community building. So one of, my early zines was actually a zine for my daughter's birthday. And, it was their 13th birthday, their golden birthday. And so I reached out to all, friends and family, and I just asked them, here's the table of contents for all the different relatives that submitted something for the zine. And I reached out to friends and family and just asked them to create their own zine page for Estella. And so you can see, right, like they're very, very, let me go here. You can see that, all of the pages are very different. There's some like, this one. There are some, I can see that my daughter hasn't used some of these pages yet, but there are some interactive pages, opportunities for like Estella to add things to the zine at a later date, lists 13 things 13 things I love about Estella, some drawings from their younger cousins and siblings, etc. And so, zine was a gift, and it was a way to like commemorate a special moment for my daughter. It was a way to kind of archive some of their life, right? Like Lorenzo, I was thinking a lot about the archival process. And so, this is one of my earlier ones. And then, in terms of like community building, and I think in terms of being able to pass these practices forward. Lorenzo mentioned a little bit about teaching zine workshops as well. And one of the things that I really love that has become like a result of my zine work has been that my kids are really into zines also. And so this is one, that my oldest daughter actually created for me for a birthday several years after I created theirs. Right. And, that just images and cutting and pasting and, but it was such a beautiful gift. And so in this way, right, I really think of zines as like an expression of love, an expression of care. A lot of labor goes into zine making if you've ever made one, right? Like I wish actually that I had pulled out some of my original pages, right? I love how I love the process that it takes, so my original pages before I actually do any photocopying, it's all cut and paste. It's a lot of just cutting out text, cutting out pictures, layering things together. And so it takes a long time. And so, I really think again about for me, zines are a labor of love. A lot of my zines also, my personal zines are, they're collage based. I love to make collages, and sort of like Cleo was saying, a big part of my work also comes from not seeing representations of American Indians in popular culture. Right. So whether that's sort of like mainstream publishing and the books that we read, or whether that's the television and the music that we listen to, or whether that's even, going into art spaces. There are lots of, BIPOC art spaces in Los Angeles where I am, but very few of those ever, really are ever focused on American Indians or the first peoples of this land. And so a lot of my storytelling really focuses on sharing ideas and really just highlighting, things from my community. So this piece that I created, I created this piece after one of my aunties passed away. And, so I created this one titled Las Aunties. And what I love, I wanted to show you this one because my sister actually is one of the folks featured in this zine. And then she bound the zine for me and sent it back to me, if you can see there, with beadwork on the zine. And so, again, even though this one I created on my own, in a way, it eventually it even originated in collaboration also. And so this one, I just love this particular zine, right? It's a fictional, but sort of a creative, non-fictional also. So I take a little bit of creative license, but it's really a story about the significance of aunties in Native culture and in many marginalized cultures and cultures of color. And I feature, different aunties that have been really instrumental to helping me as a single mom to raise my children. And so, each auntie has like a collage. Each auntie has, also sort of like an ode to them, right? This one, says, Thea Wilma is a boss. Her and my mom met at a roller skating rink, on and on, right? And so I tell a little bit of, what makes each of these aunties special. And so again, like this one is also for me very much a labor of love. And this whole zine started with just this collage, and this is a collage that says, "In Aunties We Trust." And I built this collage, thinking about my auntie Sandy, who had just passed away, and really wanting to honor her. And then eventually just, this one small paper collage turned into this zine and turned into a screen print. And eventually, actually, this particular story was published in a graphic novel titled Dear Woman, that is a bunch of stories about Native, it's a bunch of stories that Native women are telling about about this particular character that we have in a lot of our communities called Dear Woman. So those are some of my own zines. I know we don't have a ton of time right now, so I'm going to kind of just speed through. I mentioned that I am a professor, and so I do a lot of zine making in my classes. And again, one of the key things that I think about as a Native scholar and as a feminist identified scholar, I think about I think about the ways in which academia can be can be extremely oppressive and restrictive, and really violent for folks from marginalized communities, right? Whether one identifies as queer or trans or identifies as Black and Indigenous, et cetera. These spaces can be really alienating. And so I teach zine making practices both as a way to express, again, as many of the others have mentioned, like to express these stories that frequently are invisibilized, and I encourage my students to use zines in that way. But I also teach zine making as sort of a research practice. And I don't even really like to use the word research because I find that, research too, it's a dirty word for a lot of communities of color, right? Research is a practice where folks, academics and generally, privileged academics come into spaces and they extract information from various communities. And then, usually what does that research result in? It results in like a peer reviewed publication, or maybe it results in an academic book, but very rarely does the results of the research actually benefit the communities themselves. So my Beating as Medicine series, and right now it's just 2 volumes, but my Beating as Medicine series comes from an assignment actually that I give my students, where I ask them to quote unquote do research, but to really think of their community as theorists and experts of their own lives. And so to kind of demo this project with my students, I'm a bead artist, an American Indian beadwork artist. And so I was just looking for some beadwork laying here, but so anyways, I'm a bead artist. And so I reached out to a ton of other American Indian bead artists, and I asked them, the prompt was very, very simple. And I asked them to talk about the ways that beadwork acts as medicine in our lives. So I just gave them the prompt. It says, there are so many ways that Native women and non-binary folks talk about their beads, their beadwork, and their practices of beading. For us, it is not an exaggeration to say that our beadwork often acts as medicine that helps us to heal, medicine that prevents sickness, and medicine that even saves our lives. And then I asked all of these bead artists, can you give me a brief statement about how beadwork acts as medicine for you? And so, this is one of my favorite zines. It doesn't have any images in it. And I was actually being really inspired by Lorenzo. I was like, oh my gosh, I should have an image of each artist's beadwork in here. So I think thank you, Lorenzo. I think I just found volume 3. But I reach out to a bunch of bead artists. And then, right, I just, I don't edit their words. I don't try to analyze their stories, right, which are some of the things that we traditionally are taught in terms of research in the academy. I just allow the bead artists to speak for themselves and to really, theorize for us, what does their beadwork mean to them? And again, this is, as a Native community member, this is very, very important, right? Because most of the work that has been written about us, I would say up until like the 1970s, 1980s at least, most of the things that were written about us were not written by us. They were written by folks outside of our community. So if I were to go and if I were to go and Google, American Indian beadwork, 9/10 of the sources, or just, the coverage of it, I guess, that I'm going to find is going to be written by non-natives and non-bead artists. And so, for me, this was really just an important project for, providing a platform where folks from my community, I identify as a member of this community, and it allowed me to provide a platform for them to, share some of their words and again, be the experts of their own lives. One of the things that's important to me too is reciprocity. So that's a very much like a value that comes from my people. And so every contributor in the first volume, I can't remember now, but I think there were roughly like 25 contributors. In the second volume, I think it was about 30, 35. And each contributor to the zine, I sent out a free copy and made sure that, they also were able, again, there was some reciprocity. They gifted me with their participation and I gifted them back with one of the completed zines. And then I think finally, I'll just kind of wrap up by talking a minute about, how I also use zines in community. I facilitate a lot of bead workshops and a lot of talking circles. And I do that for Native youth, for Native survivors of violence, for women and femme-identified Native folks, et cetera. And in those spaces, right, we're talking generally, quite a bit about like beading as medicine, beading as a practice of healing. And zines, work the same way for me. The same way that I have been able to heal from some of my own traumas and my own, the violences I have faced. The same way I've been able to do that healing through my beadwork, I've also done a lot of that healing through my zine making. And so when I facilitate these workshops, I always make like an accompanying zine for it. So, that in some ways I'm kind of, facilitating 2 workshops at once. And so, so like this is an example of one of those zines, and I provide it to all the participants. It has some basic things like their workshop schedule. It has the program goals. But then, I include some of the words of other bead artists that I really admire. I include some graphics, of ways that I theorize and think about the significance of beadwork. Sorry. Some definitions, et cetera, some images of things we'll be making. And I always generally, in most of my zines, I try to leave a space like for note-taking or for some kind of interaction. Yeah, so I think, to wrap up, I've really enjoyed all the presentations today, and it's really just inspired me to think about how I can continue to grow my zine making skills and practices. And I think that's my favorite thing about it, is that it really just, there are thousands and thousands of types of zines out there, thousands of different expressions of identity and expressions of, politics. Like Mio said in the very beginning, they're sometimes used as tools to teach information, et cetera. And I think that's just one of the things that excites me about zines. There are endless possibilities. And then I think just the last thing I would like to say, another thing that I love about zine making is that, and this has been mentioned too, is that you can do so much with a little, so again, I work full time. I'm a single mom. So a lot of my zine making, it happens late at night, after my kids are in bed, with, literally like a glue stick and some scissors. I have gotten a little, I have moved into digital zines a little bit. Like when I produce these instructional zines, I use a computer program a little bit more, but to me, it's a very like woman of color feminist practice, and a very Native feminist practice to collaborate, with our community, to make a lot out of very little. And, like was already being expressed earlier, to produce and bring some joy into lives that can sometimes be, pretty ugly. So, okay, thank you very much. And I look forward to hearing some of you in the Q&A.
Thank you, Kimberly. So for those of you who are interested in contacting Kimberly or learning more about her work, visit her website at kimberlydawnrobertson.com. Follow her on Instagram at KDR/slays the or email her directly at goldenrobertson@gmail.com. And we're going to open the floor for the Q&A portion. We're going to bring back all of our zinesters for you.
All right. Thank you, everyone, for doing your wonderful presentations. They were all really good, and usually we wouldn't go over, but the audience is super active for this event. So everybody is just really excited to ask you questions. So I am going to ask 2 questions only, and we'll try to keep the answers brief so we can get to everything. So Gabe, can we have that first question about scrapbooking from Rogue Ra? I guess they wonder what separates this type of zine from scrapbooking. So in your practice, Is there a difference? Does it even matter? What do you guys think about what separates a zine from scrapbooking? Kimberly, do you want to start off?
Sure. I think for myself, it would be the distribution of the zine. I'm not a scrapbooker, but if I were, I would imagine that I wouldn't probably distribute those to others. And so, for me, again, it's really about what stories do I want to put out into the world, or what info do I want to share with the world, and specifically with my community. So I think that's what the primary difference for me would be.
Lorenzo?
I agree. You said it well, Kimberly.
Anyone else want to chime in? No? No? Okay. Let's I have a question that just populated that I wanted to be our last and final question. It's from our library dean, Mike Garabedian. So he says, this has been such a rich discussion. Thanks to our moderator and to the panelists for sharing their amazing stories and work. Zines can be fragile and usually have a limited print run. They're almost like rare books in a certain sense. So I just wonder if any of the folks can speak to if their zines have been acquired by public or academic libraries, and if so, whether they know if the library treated zines in any special way in order to protect the zines while providing access to patrons. Can we start with Eunsoo?
Sure. I have a couple of zines that are, whenever I visited like different events, some of the librarians of the city would purchase my zines and have it cataloged. I had a couple of librarians reaching out to me in email how to make sure that my zines were cataloged in a proper way to make sure that I feel comfortable with it, and then the patrons of the library can check out either PDF files or request to borrow from the library. So I think there are quite libraries who are familiar with the zines that archives and respects the zines in that way, and there are some libraries that may not really know much about the zines, which they don't have that access to for that community. So if you are the librarian, maybe you should consider it.
Cleo, do you have an answer for this question?
Yeah, I have my zines in a couple of library spaces. A lot of the time, when you do like any kind of small zine fair, there will be an option to like donate a zine, and usually it will be kept that way in a small archive. Somehow my zine has reached Rio Hondo. I don't know how. I'm just like a little Canadian artist, so it's pretty impressive. So I know a lot of the zine library spaces that my work are in, you can't take the zines out of the space. So that's one way to kind of ensure that it doesn't get damaged and be preserved in an archive. I also know, so the last university I went to, which is OCAD, the Ontario School of Art and Design, they have a zine library on site. And one of the zine librarian's jobs is to archive the work by scanning the zines itself and preserving it that way, and then everything is uploaded to JSTOR, which I think is accessible all over the world. I'm not sure if it's Canadian only, but then like that creates a record of your zine as well and lets it be accessible. But yeah, PDFs are a really great way to ensure that anyone can access a zine anywhere. But yeah, usually to preserve it so it doesn't get damaged, it stays on site.
Great. And I know, Lorenzo, you have to go, so I wonder if you want to speak to this?
Yes. Fortunately, I am, some of my work is in a few different libraries. Unfortunately, I can't think of the name. I know for sure one, when I did the Boston Art Book Fair in 2019, two librarians that represented different libraries, we got a couple copies of my Simple Things zine in my community, 21 Days of Community project. Also, there's a library in Long Beach that has a few archives of my Simple Things project. But aside from libraries, a bookstore, Arcana Books, which is like a pretty well known art bookstore here in Los Angeles. He actually has an archive of I probably have to give him a couple more, but like he purchased copies of several of my zines, because he has like an archive of just for Black visual artists. So that he keeps just for display at his shop in Culver City. Yeah.
Very cool. Kimberly?
Yeah. Yes. So some of my zines are in various libraries too. I don't, I always donate. If I'm asked to donate one for a library, then, I'm certainly down to do that. I think in terms of like protecting the zines themselves, I would never send an original copy of a zine anywhere. So for me, I'm not one that's like super concerned about like preserving the zine. I think for a lot of Native artists, or I don't know, in a lot of ways, like the sort of art that we've always made, it's meant to have like kind of it's meant to eventually expire, right? Like if we're making baskets, there are things that we use in our everyday life. And when they break down, like that basket ancestor like returns to what it originally was. And it's sort of already given us, what we needed from it. And I think of my zines in the same way. They're, to some communities, they're extremely important. I mean, my Beating as Medicine zines, those have probably sold, I don't know, at this point, probably like 500 of those zines have been shared. Folks have purchased them to teach in their classrooms, to teach in beating workshops, what have you. But, I just imagine that when that zine, when folks aren't asking for it anymore, that it's probably done its time, and I'm okay with that.
That's cool. I love that. I mean, they feel ephemeral to some degree, but yet precious. That is all the time we have today. I want to take a moment to thank you all for your time. Lorenzo had to log off too because he has an appointment. But thank you, artists. It really was a dream panel that Claudia and I put together, that we were hoping you would say yes, but we weren't sure, and why not just ask? And we admire all of your works and really appreciate your time. I also want to say thank you to Claudia for your time, because it's wonderful that you've put this collection together. By the way, just a quick aside, I bought everyone's zines because I love zines, but also because I want to donate some of them to the library. And Eunsoo also generously offered to donate some of her work to the library, so much appreciated. So students will be able to see those zines in our collection. But thank you, Claudia, for what you're doing for our library and for working together to create this event, because I think it's really cool and people are really excited to see these zines. So thank you.
Absolutely. And thank you, Mio, for hosting this and getting us all together to do this. We wouldn't have been here without you and your passion to bring this to the public's eye. So thank you also.
Oh, thank you.
And to all the amazing panelists today. Thank you for hanging in there with us.
Yes, we love you. You're great. Just one quick announcement before we go. Next event for Rio Hondo College, we're starting a 2-event series called Women in Tech. That I work together with Dr. George Wheeler, who teaches electronic music at Rio Hondo College. Our event will be on March 18th. It's an evening event. It's a music event. So it's 7:30 p.m. on March 18th. We will have an artist who will be broadcasting from Vienna, Austria, Pamela Stickney, and she's going to do a solo theremin orchestra. So it's going to blow our minds, I'm sure. So anyway, if you want to know what other events we're having, go to www.riohondo.edu/art to see our cultural events calendar. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.